What if the secret to unlocking performance, productivity, and profit wasn't a new strategy, software, or hire, but in your culture? Today's guest, Chris Dyer, is one of the world's top voices on company culture and remote work. He's the #1 leadership speaker on culture, according to Inc. magazine, and the best-selling author of several books related to company culture and remote work, including The Power of Company Culture and Remote Work. His companies have been consistently ranked among the best places to work, and his work has helped leaders worldwide build thriving teams, even in the most turbulent times. So I'm really excited to have him on here today. Whether you're managing a remote team or rebuilding your culture or just trying to survive another round of return to office debates, Chris brings candor, humor, and a 7-pillar framework that gets results. Chris, it's an honor to have you here.
Hey, Mason, thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So let's dig in. So I know you've built companies that were both fast growing and great places to work. Two things that often don't go together. What was the key to pulling that off?
Well, I pretty much screwed it up for the first 8 or 9 years, trying to do it the traditional way. And that's like, what do you learn from your coaches and your parents? And like, I was a sports coach for a lot of years out of college. And I think I took that framework at some level to the office. You know what I mean? Of like, yeah, there's that, we're a team, rah, 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 but also don't do what I say, you go do 10 push-ups, right? Of like, there's a little bit of that command and control, I think, kind of attitude. And we were hit by the big recession in 2009. And I had to go back and completely rethink the business because it wasn't working the way it should have worked. We weren't responding the way I thought we should have responded as an organization. And as I'm looking around, I finally realized that, it's my fault. I'm the CEO. Like, I built this thing. And if it's not operating the way in which I think it should be operating, I have nowhere to look but in the mirror. And so I got really, really interested. And what I ended up doing, and I didn't realize I was doing this until I had finished, but I basically every year looked at a really big problem in the organization and got wildly curious and fascinated about why it was happening. How did we fix it? How did we help our people? What was the best thing for everyone, right? What was the best thing for our people? What was the best thing for leadership? What was the best thing for the company? And then put that into place. And so the first thing I started with was, well, how do we save the company? Because we were going to go out of business with the recession had hit. Well, we sent everybody home. Remote work was the key, and then it was, well, how do we grow? And so I got really interested in sales. And then it was, now we're all stressed out. So I got really interested in burnout, right? And so it was about me as the CEO getting hyper-focused on my people issues and spending my time there and not spending my time in like, I don't know, executive meetings all day looking at P&L sheets. Like, it was, how do I go in? I kind of acted more like a CPO, I guess that might be. I had a CPO with the CEO's abilities and the CEO's permissions to go and radically create change in the organization every year.
Awesome. Because I mean, and that's an interesting topic right now because I'm seeing all this shift of everyone talking about AI and everybody talking about metrics and efficiency and productivity. And I'm convinced that one of the best strategies has been and will always be just being a human and engaging with your people and treating them like they want to be treated. And good for you, man. So what is the biggest misunderstanding leaders have about company culture, and how do you help them shift their thinking?
So there's usually a pretty decent understanding of like, what is a good culture? We sort of know, like, am I in a bad culture or am I in a good culture? A good culture has the basic parameters. We know what our values are. Maybe we like the people we work with. Our boss isn't a jerk or the CEO isn't a jerk. Like, that kind of gets us into the good realm. And I think the problem is that people stop there. It's sort of like, listen, no offense to Toyota or Toyota Corollas, but Toyota Corolla is a good car. It's totally fine. But if you went and sat in a, I don't know, 5 Series Mercedes or a McLaren or like whatever your dream car, you get into that thing and you're like, okay, there's another place we can go here. Right. There's something faster. There's something more comfortable. There's something more luxurious, whatever it is that you might like in a car. But if all you know is a Toyota Corolla, there's a bit of a limitation into the experience that you can have and what you know or think that you can do. So the biggest challenge I usually have is for people to realize that they can become a great culture, and that there is a formula, that culture is not an art. This is not some touchy-feely thing. It is actually a science. So if we think about things very specifically, we implement very specific strategies, we can work on that culture to suddenly transform that Corolla into whatever it is you think you want. Maybe you need a Sprinter van to get your team there. Maybe you need a Ferrari. That answer is different for every culture. But there is a way for us to be really, really good. And I think that's a challenge I face all the time, is that people will live in mediocrity. They will live in that this is good enough kind of space. And it's usually because they just don't know how much better it can be.
So let me ask you a question. You talk about people don't know how much better it can be. There's companies there are people that are living every day in terrible, toxic cultures where they start getting nervous about going to work on Monday, Sunday night. They call in sick when they're not. They're crying in the bathroom when they don't think anyone can hear them. So those are characteristics that are easy to define in cultures that are toxic and bad. What are some characteristics and traits you think that are easy to identify the good culture, just like you said, like, hey, maybe a good culture sounds great to someone in a toxic culture. But what are some of the characteristics that are good cultures that people get comfortable with? And how does that contrast with some of the characteristics of great cultures?
Yeah, so in a good culture, like when things are going well, we can handle most things. But when things are not going well, the organization suddenly gets stressed. Leaders don't know how to make decisions, right? There's a lot of it's easy for that to shift. It's a very weak, if you want to use a shield as an example, I have a very weak shield to outside forces. So when things are fine, good culture can be fine. So what we need, though, to become great, and I have 7 pillars in my book that explain every organization that we would qualify as a great culture.
Now we're
At that
talking.
Right. At the moment they are a great culture, we've seen organizations be great and we've seen them fall. But at that moment that they're great, they're really good at these 7 things. And these 7 things can be interpreted however they want, because how Zuckerberg's doing this versus how, Google's doing this versus how, somebody else is doing, they're all different, but they're always really good at these 7 things. And the first one we start with is always transparency. So in a great culture, we are highly transparent, meaning we are sharing data, we are sharing the P&L, we are sharing goals. We know what each other's goals are on our team. Each team knows each other's goals. If someone joins the company, we know why, and we know why they got hired, and we understand who they are. If someone gets fired or someone leaves, we know why. Now, there are sometimes reasons we can't know why, but as long as there's not some compliance thing, we're open and honest about it, right? We talk about our failures. We talk about what's happening so we can learn from it. And so also so people can make better decisions.
And that
If
takes
you
guts. It's worth it, but it takes guts.
Right. So in the very beginning, it's sort of like getting off the couch is hard, but once you start your walk, you feel pretty good, right? And you're happy you did it. But you're sitting on the couch and you're like, do I really want to take all this time to explain how to read a P&L? I really want to take all this time to explain why we did this whole big project and why it failed, or why, whatever. That can be that get off the couch moment.
And
But
I
what I
think yes, and I think that the contrast of that is what happens if you don't. What happens if you don't is a change happens and someone gets scared and they start assuming the worst and they start spreading rumors like, why do you think they did that? Or why do you think that? And everyone speculates. And of course, they automatically go to the worst case scenario and they get your whole culture all wound up about something that may not even be true and is certainly not helpful or productive. So I love your point on transparency. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So, Mason, you're reminding everyone of a cognitive bias that we have, that if we don't know something and we have to fill in the gap, we always fill it in with something from our past that is negative. So, if in my first job, whenever the boss slammed the door and went to his office, someone got fired, well, if my boss comes in and slams the door and I don't know what's going on, okay, someone's getting fired because that's what happened last time in my job, right? And we don't stop as human beings and go, well, wait a minute, I just need to get more information. No, we get scared and we hide, and And that's when the organization, everything slows down. We don't make decisions quickly. We're not getting, so if you want your company to go faster, you want to grow more, you want to do more, you've got to get that information out there so that we limit the amount of time people are spending being worried and anxious about things that don't even exist, right? But also, and this is the problem I had, is I was standing in front of thousands of people saying, "Hey, we may lose this company. We're in the crapper right now. I need ideas. I need this." And they all just stared at me because they didn't know what I knew. I had not given them all of the information they knew for them to go, "Oh, I have this idea. We could do this. We could do that." And as soon as I started sharing, their ideas got better. In fact, their ideas got better than mine in most cases
And you
because I
probably got
had,
a lot of engagement because no one's going to be arguing against their ideas. They want their ideas to succeed. So you've got instant engagement and commitment because you collaborated in coming up with outcomes. I love what you're saying. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah.
Tell me about your other pillars. Transparency is a first pillar. How about next?
Yeah, and really, if you were to look at the 7 pillars, I always tell companies, if you see one or two that you're like, that's where we're really bad, that's where you should focus your time to get better, to kind of improve that. But I do find that transparency is the one that, like, pretty universally people are struggling with. They could always do better. The one that I think that surprises people is the positivity pillar. So I am not talking about toxic positivity or saying everything is okay and pretending that everything's all right. The positivity pillar really focuses on 2 areas. One is, how do we get curious about and how do we focus on doing more where we're already good? Alex Herzizian, he just you had another big book come out, and like I
Mosey,
heard,
yes, I read
yeah,
it. I've read that book. It's excellent.
and I've heard him talk on his things of like, if you're already doing really well, why don't you go do that next? Like, why are you running out to this next little idea that you had in your head? And that's a part of the positivity pillar. I think he framed it in a really nice way that I wish I had framed it. But it's like, if you have 2 salespeople that are doing really well and you have 5 that are struggling, what do we do? We always go put all our energy on the 5 people that are struggling, and we're all over them and we're trying to fix them, and we leave those 2 people who are doing really well and we're like, just don't touch them, leave them over here. And that's wrong. We need to be like, why are those 2 people successful? What can they teach us? Can they teach everybody else something? Can we give
Eliminate,
them more support?
eliminate.
Right?
You talk about giving them support. Eliminate friction. Amplify their existing
Right.
message. Yes.
Right. Like, do you need those 5 struggling salespeople? Maybe what you need is 2 assistants to help your 2 top salespeople to go sell more. If they don't, you need someone else to go put the junk into the CRM and all of that, right? So what I've always said is, where what you focus on grows. And so if we focus on what we're doing well first, we focus on what our key strengths are first, is very clear about how we should move forward in any situation. Now, yes, we still look at things and say, how can we improve in other areas? But if you walk around being a problem solver and you walk around the office looking for things to fix, you are not a very popular person in that office. You walk around trying to catch people doing the right thing and giving them a high five. You go around noticing when people are doing amazing things. Guess what? People want to do amazing things and want you to catch them doing the right thing. You walk around catching people doing the wrong thing, they're just going to figure out how to do the wrong thing without you looking.
It's so true.
Right? And so it's just a way of thinking about it. So that's one way of thinking about positivity. The second way is, what if you said yes to every question asked of you? I mean, to think about it, you spent the rest of the day saying yes to everything. Now, I'll give people a few little helpful tips here. Don't tell anybody you're going to say yes to everything, right? Your kids and your spouse will run you ragged. But, like, if you can just do that as your own personal thing. And then secondly, use yes and yes but. And those don't always, it's not perfect. And there's a funny Jim Carrey movie, if you want to like see, it can go to the extremes. But I did a whole year of yes after reading the book Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. I did an entire year. I didn't tell anybody. And all I did is, every question asked me, every time someone came to my office and said, hey, I have this idea. Hey, let's talk about this. Yeah, let's figure out if that's possible. Like, I gave them some version of yes. even if I knew it was a stupid idea, even if I knew last week we already tried it and it cost us money. Like, I went through the exercise with that person to allow them that thought, allow them to think through that, and to not be the wall and the stopper.
So how did
to
you
them.
use yes, but and yes, and?
So yes, but so let's say someone came to me and said, "Hey, I would like to sell our company to start selling meth. We can make a lot of money." And that's a ridiculous question. I'm going to give you a really ridiculous one to help. I could say yes, but you need to get the law changed first because that's currently illegal to sell meth. So I'm happy to consider us doing this as a business proposition, but the law has to be changed first. Like, I can't break the law, right? I know that's a totally ridiculous example, but I
It's a
could
great
find a
example,
way
though.
to say, but, right? There's a real reason why we can't do this, right? There might be moral and ethical reasons as well, but like, you could just go the easy one. It's against the law. Yes, and could be, someone comes in and says, "Hey, I really would like us to hire a new salesperson." Okay. And you go, "Yes. And we need to talk to the head of sales and see if that's a part of the budget, or if they really feel like they need another person." So we can say yes, and we need to include somebody else into this process. We need to talk to them about what they think. It's like, I'm saying, sure, that's a great idea, but and what else do we need to bring in to keep this going? And what we're trying to do is to get our people to think better. We're trying to get them to train them to level up how they approach problems and things, by helping them see that there are other variables and things in there. And if they can solve that, great. Now, another one is, "Hey, boss, can I have a raise?" Yes. And raises are done once per year. Our policy is in January, we do a thing and we give out raises once a year. And you need to have done these goals and blah, blah, blah. Like, wouldn't it be amazing if like your boss told you exactly all the things you needed to do just to get a raise?
Easy enough.
Easy enough, right? Now you can give them big goals. It doesn't have to be like, "Well, show up every day and I'll give you a raise." Like, you can go really big if that's what you want as a boss, but you can say yes, and here are the things that need to happen in order for us to get to that.
And what you're conditioning, I love this because you're conditioning them to engage and conditioning them to think instead of sit around and wait to be told what to do.
Right. Right. So those are the sort of the two ways that positivity works really, really well. And if anyone's interested, you can go deep dive into appreciative inquiry. There's a really great framework on how to do that. But how do we dream what we want? How do we dream about this? And I think this is an area, again, where most people don't spend any time. They see the problem and they're like, "Here's the fix." Here, I'll give you a great example. I used to sometimes, an issue would happen in customer service and the client was DEFCON 1 angry, and like, I would finally, the CEO, be brought in, right? Because they were mad about something. And they were a big enough client that it made sense. And the first thing, we would get on the phone and I would say, "Hey, thanks for meeting with me. But before we dive into the issue, can you tell me what we're doing well? Like, what is going good in our relationship so I can put that aside and don't have to worry about talking about that today?" And they would tell me all the great things my company did. And immediately they went from level 10 angry down to 5. Because they literally just told me, "Well, you guys do this well. You always call us back. You've been very receptive to talking about this. I really appreciate that." They got the CEO on the phone, up, down here. Now we're having a conversation, right?
Great tool.
Right. And so I'm helping them. I'm in this dream category. Now I'm saying, "Now tell me what's happening, and then help me understand what does it look like for you? If we would have had a magic wand and I could do anything, how could I change this situation so that you feel like not only is it better, but it's going to, we're going to actually solve this for you and everyone else." So what we're doing is, instead of saying, "How do I get, you were here, I pissed you off, now you're here. How do I get you back to level?" Okay. That's usually what we do when our spouse is mad at us. Like, "How do I just get you to stop yelling at me?" Right. But instead I'm saying, "How do I help me think about how do I actually take you to happier than you were before?" I'm not just trying to get you back to level. I'm trying to help. How do we redesign something so that you're actually happier when we leave this call? Our relationship is better. We've redesigned something for you and for all the other clients. And that design thinking really opens everybody up. And then we say, "Okay, well, you want me to be able to do this thing. Let's figure out that's even possible. Can we design this?" So we've dreamed it. Can we discover whether it's possible? Can we design it to it's actually real? Is that programming? Is that a change in personnel? Like whatever. And then how do we put the stickiness in? How do we design it to be, or how do we put in destiny? How do we put real levers in so this is a solution that sticks as destiny? So that's the 4D process in appreciative inquiry. And it's amazing.
My friend Shep Hyken would say, how do we take a moment of misery and turn it into a moment of magic?
Yes. Right. And I love that saying, but I'm a bit more practical. Like, I need the instruction manual, please. Right. Like, I need the 4 days to take my client through, or else, I could say
Right.
that. I can say I want magic, but how do I get to magic? This is the problem that I had for my people. We had to design very specific things with little cute names and whatever to like, so they could go back to them and reference it at the right time.
Gotcha.
Right. Because not everyone is a CEO.
Right.
And I think as CEOs, as C-level people, we often entrepreneurs, we think everyone should be able to think in the ways in which we do, and that's just not the case. Either because they can't, they won't, they haven't learned it yet. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons why, but if they're not there yet, we've got to try to help them get there.
So what other pillars are worth everybody taking under consideration that are pretty much universal and apply everywhere?
Well, maybe I'll give you the ones that are left, and you tell me which one you think is the most
That's
interesting.
a deal. That's
right.
a deal.
So we've done transparency, we've done positivity, we have listening, mistakes, uniqueness, recognition, and measurement. That's the last
Let's
one.
talk about mistakes and recognition.
Okay.
One positive and one maybe not so much.
Yeah. So with mistakes, here's the difference. There are mistakes and there are errors. Okay. Very clear difference. And we need to understand which thing has actually happened. So an error is I did something wrong because I don't care, because I haven't been trained properly, because I haven't slept in 3 days. I mean, if a nurse gives the wrong medication to a patient, is it because of a mistake? Do they do something they thought was right? Or is it because they've worked 3 straight shifts, they have had 1 hour of sleep, and they just can't possibly keep it straight, right? That's an error. And we can fix that. But that should not have happened, right? If we, on the mistake side, it's that we're trying to do something the right way, or we believed with all the information we had in that moment, we made a decision and it turned out it wasn't right. When that happens, we have to celebrate that with our people. We need to thank them for having the bravery to have made that choice, and then take the time to help them and anybody else in the team understand, what did we learn? How would we do it differently next time? Maybe what could we have done differently to have made a better decision? But use that as a teaching moment, as a celebration moment, not as a yell and scream, point fingers and blame moment.
Alex Hormozy would talk about, because I am a fan. I've read all 3 of his books, but where he talks about share the lessons without sharing the scars.
Right. But I think that the struggle for people is it a mistake or an error? Because if it's an error, that can't be tolerated. And you're not going to last very long in my organization if you keep making errors because you're careless, because you didn't do the training properly, because, I mean, if your job is payroll and you keep miscalculating the payroll, you're not going to be the payroll clerk for very long. We have calculators.
Right.
Right. That's not a mistake. That is an error. And we can't allow that to continue. But it gets a little murky sometimes trying to understand which one it is.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking of baseball. The immediate example that pops into my mind is baseball. If you're an outfielder and you keep dropping fly balls, those are errors. You can't keep making those. You have to catch the ball. Now, if you're out there and you throw it to the wrong base because the sun was in your eyes or you didn't know what to do, do I throw it to third base or do I throw it to second? That's a mistake and a teachable moment that, hey, people can talk about, hey, this is what happened here. If you're in that situation again, do that instead of this. And that's a teachable moment where everyone can get the lesson without the scars. But continuing to drop balls, you can't continue to put someone out there as an outfielder who's going to continue to make errors, i.e. drop balls. Like I think you gave a great example there. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's a great one, because if you make a decision as a center fielder, let's say, and you've got a 450-pound guy who can hit home runs but can barely run the bases, maybe throwing it to second isn't a good idea. Maybe throwing it to first is a good idea because you actually can get that guy out, right? Like, or if it's a very, very fast runner, you miss the ball. Maybe you got to throw it to third, not to second, because that guy's so fast. So you have to know different details and make different decisions. But yeah, if you just keep dropping the ball, you're not going to be in the major leagues very long, right? That's an error.
So the other one that we were going to talk about was recognition.
So
let's talk about recognition.
Every great organization has a great recognition program. In my book, I give two very clear, different ways to do it. And I did that for a couple of reasons. One is the size of your organization will sort of change your recognition program. And two, I was very confident that my way was the best way. And so I wanted to make sure I offered a counterpoint to that and not be totally in my, glass house. I believe that recognition up to a pretty large point can be about just saying thank you, having a mechanism in which we say thank you, and that it has to be bottom up, meaning the program has to be run by and energized by the people it serves. Managers can say thank you and can be a part of it, but if the managers and the leadership are the ones doing it mostly, that program will never be sustainable. So what we did is we had in our Slack channel, you could use Teams, Slack, whatever. We had a water cooler room, and that was a room where you could put your vacation photos, if your kid won a soccer trophy, like whatever was work appropriate. But it was also the place we went and we said, hey, Sally booked me on this great podcast. Thanks, Sally. Way to go. Anyone who was online at that time would just pop in and say, great job, Sally. Way to go. Gave her recognition. Very simple. Not so public that she's embarrassed if she's an introvert. I didn't put her up and on a stage, but public enough that people in the organization know she did something good. So we can get that spread around a larger organization. Because if you keep seeing Sally getting thanked for doing stuff, like, I need to know Sally. Like Sally's a good employee. How do I get connected with her? As a counterpoint though, so that works because we don't have prizes. We don't have money. We never incentivized on it. We didn't count how many green flags you got at the end of the year. We didn't do, and it was just thank you, right? Flip side, I did a huge case study with Caesars Entertainment and worked with them. Their recognition program could not be more different. So what they do is if a guest makes a comment on a card or recognizes an employee for doing something good during their stay at one of their resorts or casinos, that employee gets points. Now, they get points, but every person on shift with them that day in their department gets points. Because let's just say that someone said the valet really helped me. They helped me with my bag. They told me a great place to go have dinner. Well, that valet may have had that interaction with you because your fellow valet was in the back tagging bags for 3 hours.
Right.
Doing some other job that day. And so to be fair, if a guest had a great interaction with one person on that staff, everyone got the points. So this was a team effort, right?
I really love what you're saying about the bottom up. And I missed an opportunity to ask you to expound on why top down doesn't work. But I could think of one example that I'll share with you and I'll let you expound on it. But I did some work with one particular company where the CEO picked the employee of the month. And in this particular case, unbeknownst to the CEO, but everyone else knew it, this particular employee was incredibly toxic and out of the sight of the CEO, incredibly toxic and not helpful. And when the CEO said, this is our employee of the month, everyone's like, this is a worthless award. I don't want that if he thinks this person is the one. And there were financial rewards associated with people like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And people just looked like a suck up or a backstabber, or in this particular case, both. But that also showcased to the rest of the organization that this guy on top, the CEO, was oblivious to what was really going on. Because if he knew what was going on, he would have never done that. So, but I'm sure you've got a whole bunch of examples, probably even much more elaborate than that.
Yeah, and it's also, if you think about it, wouldn't we want thousands of little thank yous all month long to people versus one thank you to one person once per month? Like, where do you think the real value is going to be? You want to give out employee of the month? I don't think that's a great way to go, but I think that works at Subway, or that works at like some tiny little place where like there's 10 people and you really got to motivate your team and you want to, like, in a small group setting that might work, but at a large company, what we want is thank yous at scale. And that
Yes.
has to be done by the average person, right?
Amen.
And as leaders, we can start to notice patterns. We notice that Scott always gets the thank yous, or Sally is always getting, like, we can start to notice things and patterns that might help us determine who should get maybe promoted or who we should think about in leadership roles and things like training roles. But it's really about doing, people want to be thanked,
Sure.
right?
So and it is easy to say thank you, and easy to do, easy not to do. I'm going to shift gears on you instead of something that's easy to do. What's one of the toughest leadership conversations that you've ever had, and how'd you handle it?
Toughest leadership conversations. Anytime I've had to let somebody go, I have felt like that has been an incredibly difficult decision. And in part because I have this coach's mentality. And as a sports coach, I always felt like no matter where that kid was, I could get them to be better. I could help them train. I could help them get there if they wanted to get there. And so, as an employer, as a CEO, when we just couldn't get there, I always felt at least 50% responsible for that failure. That if that person wasn't working out, then I had to let them go because that was the right decision for them and the right decision for the company. It was always difficult for me to do. And the only way that I could do that was I would make a clear list and a clear, kind of journal out what this person would do and what I expected from them and how I would feel about them and how the team would feel about them in 6 months or in a year or whatever it was, if they were doing an amazing job. And if we got to that point in time and I look back at what I expected and it wasn't there, I made a promise to myself I'd let them go. Because
How did you handle those
otherwise,
conversations? How did you handle those conversations? They're very difficult. Do you have any insights that you want to share on how? Because I'm sure there's other
I mean,
folks that are listening who are struggling with that.
assuming this wasn't, something toxic, if it was something toxic and terrible, like it would be, listen, it's not working out here. Here's your final paycheck, off you go. But those are very rare, very, very rare. Mostly it was something in the middle, right? Where they thought they were trying and I thought we were trying. But like, again, if we reflect back and we're just not there. I have big goals for the organization. And if we're not there, we're never going to get to where I know we can be. And so often I tried to take responsibility for anything that I felt like we just couldn't get there as an organization or myself, but also frame it in the sense of like, I don't think I'm doing them any help by having them continue to work here because I can see they're not happy. I can see they're frustrated. I can see
It's
they're not.
almost never a surprise. I mean, my experience has been most people aren't surprised. They felt something wasn't right. It's not out of the blue. Not always, but most of the time.
And I always told people when I hired them, like, you need to be very clear. I've told them everything I could about the company and the culture. Like, you need to be very clear that you are joining this because this sounds great to you. Not because you need a job, not because you want a paycheck, not because you want to work remote. If that's the reasons, like, this is not going to work out for you. Like, you really need to be excited about what I've told you about this organization. I mean, for some people, being highly transparent freaks them out and they don't want to do that. Right. And I am being highly transparent. They're like uncomfortable. And I would tell them, like, I need you to be very clear. And then when you get started, if you show up on day 1 or you show up on day 14 and you're like, I don't think this is for me. I already told them, I've given them permission. You need to come to me and say, I don't think this is it for me. And no hard feelings. Because the worst thing you could do is we go 6 months or we go a year and I have to fire you because we both know it's not working. And so I've already set them up for how to deal with this. So if we get to that moment and they haven't made that choice, they already have like usually some sense of responsibility of like, yeah, I probably should have said something sooner.
So you touched on, you said a couple of magic words there, remote work. I know that's one of your areas of expertise. What do you think leaders are getting wrong about remote or hybrid work? And what are some of the ones that are doing a great job? What are they doing differently?
Well, to do a great job at remote work, you have got to redesign everything. You cannot run your organization like you did when they were all in one place. It's like someone took a saddle off a horse and put it into, Henry Ford's first car and said, well, this is a good seat. Like, you have to redesign things and
Can you
think
give me
about
an
how to
example? Can you give me an example of maybe a
give an example. So, really easy to move information around the company and to maybe pop into the conference room and have a quick meeting and feel like we actually got things done and that there was a flow to it, because just before the meeting, some bit of information was being exchanged, verbally, non-verbally, whatever. And then we had the meeting, and then when we were done, little side questions and things could happen. Now, what happens when we now are in remote work and we all pop onto a Zoom? We all pop on at the same time. We didn't have any of that pre-communication. We all had a conversation. No one could observe if people's legs were crossed or they were squirming in their seat, or, like maybe their cameras weren't even on. So we don't even know if they were rolling their eyes the whole time. Like, I'm missing out on this communication. And then we turned off the Zoom, and then like there was nothing. And so I think leaders make the incorrect choice by saying, well, that means remote work's not as good. That means we should all be in the office because we need all those little things. All we have to do is redesign it. Okay. So I'll give you a good example. We redesigned all of our meeting types. We gave them all funny names, and they all had different purposes. They had different rules. And so in a typical work setting, we're keep probably showing up for a very similar meeting. And that works because we can have little side meetings all the time. But in remote work, we need different meetings with different rules and different times to help us achieve that same thing. So let's just say that you suddenly have a problem. Client calls you, tells you there's something going on, and you don't know how to fix it. At the office, you might go running around from desk to desk asking who knows how to do this, and someone's going to overhear you talking to somebody else and say, oh, you know what? Go talk to Todd. He knows how to fix that. Like, and you get that solved that way. But in remote work, now you're like picking up the phone, calling people one at a time. You're spending 3 hours on YouTube trying to figure out the solution. So you lose that quick answer. So we developed something called a cockroach meeting. 15 minutes or less. Anyone can call the meeting, invite anybody you want. 5 to 7 is the max. And it's totally optional for people to attend. So you got a problem, client called you up, you go into Slack or you send out an email to those 7 people and say, hey, at 1:00, anyone who can join me, here's my problem, I could use some help. And obviously it can't be something that's like so easy someone could just email you the answer, but it's something a little bit more, we got to think about this.
multiple
And so,
variables and dynamics?
right. And so what we found is by doing this, we had like 45 of these going on every single day on my team. And they were moving information around quickly. They were getting decisions. They were helping someone figure out what's the next thing they need to go do. And the average cockroach meeting was 7 minutes. So no, hey, how's it going? Talk about the weather and our kids. It's show up. Hey, here's my problem. Okay, yeah. The last time this happened, we did this, and this. But then if that didn't work, we had to get Todd and IT to undo this thing. And okay, cool. Thanks, everyone.
What are some other tips? Because you're dead on. Like when you started describing, like I'd be like, well, that's why people. I mean, literally, I was thinking in my head, well, that's why people don't want to do remote because you can't get answers to stuff. Like you figured a way. What are some other tips you have about how to make remote work work?
The other thing is you need a centralized communication channel or highway. For us, it was all internal communication must be on Slack. So you do not email each other. You do not text each other, right? Everything is on Slack internally. And what that did is now everything was there. It was easy to go back and search and find files and find conversations if you remembered something a month later. Okay, so it centralized it all. It also allowed people to be able to be off and on. So if I'm at a doctor's appointment and I'm off for an hour, okay, I would have employees who would email me and then they would Slack me and then they would text me, right? I mean, they got desperate. They go into WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. I mean, they would like hound me. But if I said, listen, it goes into Slack and that's it. And if I'm inactive for that hour When I come back in, I will see the messages and I will reply the moment I'm able to reply. And I'm not being hit by stimulus and pings and dings from all over the place.
It'd be
My
chaos.
it was chaos for a while, right? And then I was like, oh, but wait a minute, Mason sent me this thing. Is it an email? Is it in my phone? Is it in my Slack? So again, we centralized everything, and that was there. So that really helped us be far more productive in a remote work setting. Now, externally, of course, we had email, but even externally, if things were in email and they were clients and they were leads, everything was in our CRM. So if I wasn't sure, I could check Slack, and the next place I was going to go is a CRM. That was a lot easier for me to search than going into my email to try to find something. So because our emails would sync with the CRM, so like even if we did send email, it was there. Like so we had easy places to find things, and so that made it far easier for us to communicate and to work together. And again, we put the green flag in Slack, right? We would use that as a highly collaborative tool. I think that that's probably one of the most important things. And then the sub point out of that is if you are in 3, maybe 4 time zones, if you got some people in Hawaii or something, you can operate an organization in real time. You're going to have people coming on and off line, but like the main hours of the day, you've got pretty much all your people working at the same time. But if you have 5 or more time zones, you now have asynchronous work, which means you're going to have to shift a little bit on how you collaborate, because there may be people working on something up to a certain point, and there needs to be a handoff to the next group coming online.
Well, that also, if I'm a worker and I know that those are the parameters and rules that we're going to operate under, then I can prioritize my work to say, hey, I've got 10 tasks to do, but 5 of those tasks I don't need anybody else for. That's just my time later on. I can manage my time to do those tasks when I don't really need to be interacting with other folks, and I can prioritize the tasks that are going to require interaction for those periods of time when other people are available. Makes total sense to me.
You bring up a great point. Daniel Pink calls this your golden hour. And so we would ask people to really think about what was that hour there the most productive at work during the day. And if they were really clear, like, man, from 10 to 11 is when I just get my stuff done. And we had them talk about that within their team. What was their golden hour? And most of the time, they were all pretty close. Some people who like programmers, their golden hour might be 3:00 in the morning, but they were a different group, a different breed. We highly encourage them to block that golden hour out on their calendar and to be highly, highly critical about allowing anybody or anything to come in during that hour. Right? So we shouldn't have team meetings there. We shouldn't be jumping on other types of things. We shouldn't allow a client meeting to come into there. If that is their most productive hour, they should protect that hour with their life. Because then you're right. Then if it's some other small task, I can do that later or whatever. But my deep work, that really important stuff, because if you don't, then like all of a sudden you're trying to get done at 3:00, and at 3:00 you're eating Cheetos and got a gallon of coffee going, and like you're just trying to muscle through it, and it's not your best work. No, do that work at 10 or at 9 or 5 a.m. or whatever it is. So by giving people that permission I want you to pick time in the day when you're going to be highly productive to do your work, other times of the day to have meetings and collaborate and bounce around. That really helped people. I think this is true in regular work too, but it really helps in remote.
What's funny is I'm looking back to one of the very first questions I asked you is how did you end up having a high, fast growth company and still being one of the best places to work? And now I'm starting to understand how you did that. This is a long answer, but the different parts to it, you start adding those little parts up, and I'm understanding how you could run a company that is fast growth and also viewed as one of the greatest places to work. So quick question on culture. I know it's often treated like an HR initiative. Everyone knows that. But why do you believe that culture is a CEO's job?
Your people are the most important part of getting whatever it is you're trying to get done, whatever your goals are. I mean, unless you're a team of one, I mean, even if you're a team of one, I mean, your people are your most important thing because you're the only person there. I mean, it has to be your number one job is thinking about your people, thinking about how they work. And most importantly, solving those challenges to reduce friction, to help them be more productive, to help them be happier. Because just think about how much time you can spend onboarding people and finding somebody new and trying to I just, there's so much minutia that companies spend because they have so much turnover, right? Instead of HR can be a part of the solution and they can be a part of helping me do that. But I always viewed, well, from 2009 on, I viewed it as my number one job to figure this out, right? So it was driving the change, reinforcing the behaviors that we want, and then every year picking what was the new thing that was happening that, as our company got better, we got better at growing, and then we all got stressed out and burned out, and then we had to fix stress and burnout, right? And then we had to come up with different solutions. And so this was a 1% problem. And what I mean by that is I was always trying to get 1% better. And I challenged my people and I challenged my teams and I challenged my leaders. Think about how they could get 1% better. It was up to them to decide if that was today or in the week or in the month or in the year. Like what was appropriate for them for that 1% shift. And when we all were thinking that way, one, it was so much easier to identify a small way to get better versus I'm going to need you to cut 30% of the budget. I need you to be 30% leaner. I mean, that's like, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Like that's just,
Right.
but could you be thinking about how we could save money 1% at a time? Like, oh yeah, I can do that. Right. We can start making little changes, little shifts, little things you'll hear. Totally different way. And then number two, it's so much easier for someone who's gone 6 months to turn around and look backwards and go, wow, have things gotten better? Wow, have I improved? Wow, has the customer experience gotten better? Wow, have we gotten more profitable? Right? And have those reflections over that period of time.
So obviously, like I'm sitting here reflecting back to college and my professor of military science. I was Army ROTC in college, and my professor of military science always talked about leadership by example, and you can't expect anything of anyone else that you're not willing to do yourself. And it sounds to me like you're the embodiment of that and how you roll. But and obviously trust is earned, but that's a two-way street. And I know you talk a lot about distributed work environments. Like, how do you build trust when people rarely share physical space?
Yeah, so we have to be very clear about what we expect from that person and what is it that person expects from us as the organization. So I remember early on when COVID hit and people were asking about remote work, because I had a book come out on remote work right when COVID hit, sort of dumb luck. And probably the number one question was, how do you know they're working? And I said, I've never worried about that a day in my life. And thousands of people across the country, I never once, again, what you focus on grows. And so all I focused on was the output. I focused on their, helping them be more productive, focused on making sure the goals and the expectations were clear. And then we would go back and have the leadership say, well, this is what we expected from you. Did we get there? Right? If we didn't, how do we help you? If we still can't help you, well, then maybe you don't belong here. Right? I mean, we got to, hire fast and hire slow and fire fast, and that usually made it pretty clear. Yes, out of thousands and thousands of people, there was a few instances where like somebody was just sitting on the couch eating bonbons and didn't really work. We figured that out pretty quickly, because we had clear standards of what we expected that we negotiated with that person. I would say the hardest job for me to have done this with was managers, right? Because there's not with like my customer service team, I could say, well, we would expect somebody to be able to take X amount of calls per hour. We would expect you to get a certain rating. We had very clear metrics of what good looked like. What's the metric for the customer service manager? That their team did good? I mean, that's a pretty good metric. That their team is overall performing well? Okay, great, right? And sometimes an okay manager could hide around that. But like, that was actually the hardest one for me. It was leaders. Because they had an impact, but they didn't have such a measurable, clear thing as another person might have.
So how did you handle that?
As best we could, coming up with, larger metrics with them, maybe what were projects they wanted to accomplish. What was their let's just say use customer service as an example. Was there a larger customer service goal that we expected and we wanted them to achieve? Try to come up with things that they wanted to do that year and metrics that they thought were important, and then judge them against that. It was probably some subjective things in there about, do we like working with them, and are they a good teammate on the senior team, and some other things that are in there that are maybe not so objectively measurable. But we did the best we could with those, right? Salesperson, go sell $1 million. You sell $1 million, great. You sold 200,000 this year, there's the door, buddy. That was easier to understand.
So I really appreciate your time, and I've learned a lot, and I'm certain that the people listening are learning a lot too. So I got one more question with you before we wrap up. What's a culture myth that you're tired of hearing, and what's the truth that you'd prefer that people understood instead?
Truth, the culture myth.
There's got to be one of them out there that you're like, yeah, I'm tired of hearing that, and I don't agree. Here's how I think differently.
So I don't know if it's exactly a culture myth, but it's certainly like a leadership exercise or a practice that I think is wildly outdated, especially for remote work or hybrid work. I personally believe that one-on-one meetings are stupid. And
Why do you say that?
so, and let me be very clear about what I mean before everyone freaks out and starts throwing tomatoes at the screen. I'm talking about one-on-one meetings that are the repeatable ones with your team. So if you're a leader and you have 10 people you manage and you have this one-on-one on Monday at 10 a.m. with whoever, I think that is outdated, stupid, and not serving you and that other person in any way at all.
What's a better
Now,
alternative?
so, and to be clear, you have one-on-ones for training, cool. You're working on a project with someone, cool. There's an HR issue, yes. Then you're going to have a one-on-one. But I'm talking about this repeatable, I'm your boss. We're supposed to talk every Monday at 10 about your career. What we need to do instead, and this, I had wild success with this with my organization, and I've taken this to tons of organizations who have done this really, really well. Move it to the team. So the best example I can give you is like sometimes we need individual therapy. There are moments in everyone's life that maybe you need to go work with a one-on-one therapist or a one-on-one coach. There are also moments in your life when maybe what you need is group therapy. And what you need is to go talk to a group of people who've been there, that are living what you're living, right? I was in a CEO group for years. That was my group therapy. Smart people with similar problems to me had great advice for me. I could have worked with just one CEO coach. Would I have gotten the same out of that as I got from that group of people? I don't think so. So moving it to the group, let's just say it's the customer service team, 5 to 7 people, they're in a pod, and they all know each other's goals. And you are meeting with that group of people once a week, and we're talking about how everyone is doing on their goals. So there's transparency, there's clarity, right? No one's going to say, well, I didn't do that thing because Tom won't tell me the answer. Well, Tom's on that call. And if that's the answer, guess what? We're going to get that figured out. And if that's not the truth, it's not going to be said, right? The accountability starts happening because I have my whole team there to be accountable to, not just my boss. And so you move that to the team, and now it's the whole team's job to help the whole team be successful. And isn't that what we want? Don't we want the team to be successful so the company can be successful?
Yes, that's a great point.
Right? And as a leader, like, I don't have all the answers. Why is it my job to coach those 10 people? I may not be able to help all of them.
You know what?
But that team does.
Yes, they do. There was a guy that referred to it as the collective genius. So if a CEO is listening right now and they know their culture isn't working but feels overwhelmed, what's the first small step that they can take today to turn things around?
Start asking one question every week. Do a 1-question survey and tell them whether or not that's going to be public knowledge or if it's just going to be for you. Maybe you'll just repeat back the sentiment. But ask one question like, what's the biggest frustration you have in the organization? Or who in the organization is killing it for us? Or what client, should we fire? I mean, come up with a question that's stuff that they're dealing with. And then make sure, if you ask that question on Wednesday, the answers are due on Friday. By next Tuesday, you better have gone back to everyone and said, either this is what I heard. I'm not going to give anyone's direct answers, but I'm going to tell you what I heard, and this is what we're going to do about it, right? And then ask another question on Wednesday and keep asking. What we did is once a month, we had a company-wide meeting, and I would always review the 4 or 5 questions we asked and again remind them of what we heard, what we did about it, what we're continuing to do about it. Sometimes we couldn't do anything about it, but like at least it was, they understood why we were educating people, giving them transparency about that. Again, that's that 1% mentality. How do you shift the culture 1%? You don't need to go do some giant initiative. Just start asking one question, be transparent about it. Maybe you want to share, sometimes I would share all the answers to everybody. We would create a spreadsheet and I would say, warning, your answers are going to everyone in the company. And then we would share the spreadsheet out to everybody and they would come up with ideas. I asked the question, how am I as your CEO getting in your way? I asked that question once per quarter, hoping one day they would tell me nothing. But they always told me something I was doing to get in their way.
Well, that's how you eliminate friction. And I was talking to Tullio Siragusa a few weeks ago, and he said these organizations that want to scale, they think they got to add people. And a lot of times he said, before you do that, remove the friction. And a lot of times the friction is a CEO, and that is a bottleneck. So kudos to you for having the courage and guts to put yourself out there for that kind of scrutiny. You say, hey, what am I screwing up? How am I getting in your way? Kudos to you. And again, what I'm learning from our conversation today is how you can run an organization that grows fast and has high satisfaction. Like that's my takeaway from today. And I'm very, very thankful for your time. So if other people who are listening want to know more about you, your speaking engagements, your books, the kind of work you do, what's the best way for them to interact with you or reach out?
Certainly, I'm happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn or TikTok, Instagram, wherever you hang out on social, I'm there. If you'd like some free little giveaway on those meetings I talked about or 25 starter questions for that one question survey, you can text 33777 and just put my name, Chris, and it'll immediately send you a link to download a little free PDF.
Very cool. And what's your website?
ChrisDyer.com.
And that's ChrisDyer.com.
You got it. And if you look up Chris Dyer, I'm not the Peruvian Canadian psychedelic artist. That's a different Chris Dyer. I'm the author on the culture books. So.
Cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Thanks, man.